All right, so we are live. So hello everyone, and welcome to another expert session number 87. Today we go broad then deep on personalization, one of e-commerce most discussed but least understood areas. Our guest is Tim Gaunt, founder and CEO of TSD, a digital agency with 20 plus years building commerce systems and personalization solutions. Tim writes and advises regularly on practical personalization for premium customers and has run many implementations across retail and financial services. Today, we'll map the industry, the MarTech stack, where teams stumble and simple, high ROI moves many overlook before they commit to expensive tech. Tim, welcome.
Thank you.
Um, Sure. So, Tim, let's start with the helicopter view of the industry. I think the last time I saw a what do you call like a map or a stat, there were around 10,000 Martech solutions, if I'm not mistaken, and that's
I'm probably counting many times more, I think, now. And
yeah.
five
I
don't really seem more.
I broke this conversation into several blocks. But the first, as we always start, we have a provocation, a controversial question to start with. So the question I have for you is, Tim, we've been preaching personalization for years. And the question is, why do most teams still fail to convert it into consistent revenue uplift?
So I think in reality, it comes down to complexity. People try and get too deep too quickly, and they miss the sort of the easier wins. And especially these days, as you say, I mean, 10,000 tools. It's probably a fair few more now. I think there's a sort of wood from the trees problems. There's so many options and so many different things you can go and do to target people. Everything from your basic sort of spin the wheel type sort of landing page pop-up to much more involved hyper personalization solutions. Teams often sort of get quite bogged down quite quickly with knowing where they want to go and start, really. And we've always taken the approach of keeping it simple. When we do things like your mailing list segmentation, for example. But from our experience, the people we work with have generally just overcomplicated it far too early.
I think Gartner is very good at coining terms and making it far more complicated than it should be. So I would definitely blame them. I like selling air and really like creating always a new topic, right? And then people get, I don't know. I think it's also a good starting point there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the last sort of few years, just in maybe the last sort of 3 to 5 years, we've started off with sort of very simple segmentation with sort of platforms like MailChimp or CreateSend or Klaviyo, where it used to just be one tag or another that people would go and pick up and sort of try and build your little cohorts with people. So now some of the tools that are out there, obviously AI is a sort of a big player with it, but they've got to feed more data. And from a technical implementation perspective, that's complex, because we've gone from here's a mailing list sign up to now suddenly here's a mailing list sign up, and we've got to tell you everything about the demographics of this person, where they came from, what they're looking for, and so on. So I think the complexity of the tools is definitely a thing. And when you sort of throw Gartner in, they've got lots of ideas and lots of plans of what they can go and offer as well. And I'm sure we've all been there before, but a new tool appears on the quadrant somewhere and somebody goes, brilliant, let's go and jump in and go and implement that now, because this is now dead. When the reality is that the tools are getting added are meant to be sort of building on sort of existing foundations. They're meant to be building on tools, assuming that you've already got your email sort of nailed down, your SMS marketing, your homepage personalization, all sort of the simple wins that we've got from CMS platforms and e-commerce platforms out of the box.
Tim, so before we speak about the quick wins you can have as a B2B commerce player or a retailer, so tell us about how do you think personalization has changed, especially in the past 3-5 years? When you, of course, we have the advent of AI now, but what's changed there in the industry?
Oh, there's been huge advancements. I mean, especially when it comes to machine learning. So AI is obviously sort of all encompassing when it comes to sort of MarTech especially, but the machine learning and profiling of people has got much smarter. And I think there is a challenge there, though, that the more data and the more insights we get given from things like your Google AdWords or any of your pay-per-click when it comes to your customers, I think the temptation is that there's so much data to analyze. And I think the biggest thing that's changed in certainly the last 5 years is just the amount of information, the amount of insight you can gain on your audience and on your video and on your visitors, that it almost becomes overwhelming. I think that's sort of a big challenge. There's been, I mean, AI tools are sort of coming out so quickly now, and they're selling promises that it's meant to automate things, and some of the tools do, and they are good. But I think it's just muddying the water a little bit with where to start really, and how to go and implement the basics. The recent times for us, we've taken it from, I'm just more thinking about the sort of the financial services side of things. We've taken it from sort of fairly broad brush personalization based on the herd and what other people are doing, because that's what we drive a lot of our data from, to now being very granular at such speed as well. Because this is the other thing, is before crunching data, probably 5 years ago, more than 3 years ago, took a long time to go and build those cohorts. Getting the real time flow and changes in users' activity was quite a slow process. But now it's almost instantaneous. It's so fast. But then that sort of puts retailers in a bit of a problem, and agencies like us, because it's like, well, can we run that quickly and make our systems adapt quickly enough to benefit from it?
And what's in your opinion then the typical stack that is a non-negotiable? Because as you're saying, like whenever you see a demo and on LinkedIn, like you know, like you could I think that would be applicable to any vendor. Like they show all the beautiful things that their sort of surface level technology can do and AI, but there's a lot of stuff that happens in the back end that
Mhm.
you won't have those beautiful shiny things happening on your front end if you don't have the back end fixed. So what are the non-negotiables uh,
Yeah.
for companies that want to have a martech stack and implement personalization
Yeah, it's
successfully?
a great question. I mean, data is key with anything you're going to be doing on personalization. So having ultimately any sort of customer data specific about their orders and their interests is sort of the base. So you've got to have a really good CMS or e-commerce platform, sorry. Once you've sort of got your CRM sorted, and that's in that sense, I'm not necessarily talking about sort of like taking off to a HubSpot or a Salesforce CRM. I'm thinking more about the order data within your e-commerce system that you've already got set up. That's so powerful. There's so many insights you can pull out of, what are similar products, what are people ordering over, in one sort of group of your people versus the people that you're now talking to, and you can go and identify them. That's one thing. You need to have a good CMS, and there are plenty of CMSs out there. I'm sure you know some of my favorites, but as long as they can use the data, there are plenty of e-commerce platforms out there now. But what we tend to find is some of the e-commerce focused platforms, especially when the thing comes to things like Shopify, which is sort of prime favorite at the moment, the CMS lacks a little bit, and that can hamper the sort of the capabilities to go and achieve some of your quick wins. Your email and marketing platforms, again, they're pretty synonymous. There's some pretty big ones out there, depending on the sort of the size of your business and the sort of nature of the type of emails you're sending out. But most of them now do allow some level of segmentation, and then so you can go and do your personalization from then. And then I'd say that's your absolute core to be able to go and boost. Because for me, personalization is really about bringing people back to the site. It's not just the first visit; it's the repeat visit. It's sort of getting people back, giving them the reason to come back, and then when they're there, actually giving them an experience that they want to purchase from you again. And there's a lot you can get out of your data to attract new customers for sure, but the repeat customers are a lot more valuable in the longer term, I think. So the sort of the last piece of the puzzle that is probably a secondary piece of the tech stack is a personalization engine. So there are quite a few out there that are usually platform specific now. So Sitefinity's got Sitefinity Insights, for example. Umbraco's now got Umbraco and Engage as sort of two that people are fairly familiar with. Adobe's the platform, and those engines are there effectively as a data capture tool, and a bit like Google Analytics and Microsoft Clarity and things sort of give you user analytics. The insights engine, the personalization engines are capturing the events that we can then go and build personas about people and understand who they are, what they're trying to do on the site. But really, that's a secondary tool because you can build a lot of that data from the platform data you've got at the moment with your orders and your customer data.
So when you walk in, or let's say just high level, that also depends on the size of the organization. But you mentioned data, you mentioned CMS or e-commerce platform, could be both.
Mhm.
You mentioned mailing system, and then some
The
sprinkle
personalization engine, yeah.
the personalization. So what's the difference of the personalization and the CDP? And I don't want this to get very technical, but it's also important to, depending on the size of the organization, you will need a CDP, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so basically, the best way to think about it is it's a bucket that you can go and put all the information into about your customers, and then if you get the right platform, then you can then go and sort of tease out the information on those. I think again, sort of certainly large organizations need it from the outset, and generally when we implement e-commerce sites these days, we put in the basis of CDPs so that people are capturing the data from day one. We're not necessarily using it, it's just the fact that the events are being stored. So for example, you could toss into it actions that you do. You might go and view a category, or you might go and add a product to the cart, or you might go and do a search. And you're trying to capture that event, a bit like games for people that are familiar with things like Google Analytics. You capture the event, and then that event has certain metadata to it. My zoom camera getting all excited. You get all the event data sort of comes in, and then you can use that data then go and segment your users. So you could go and find people that visit particular categories. But the idea with the personas, which is sort of what you're effectively building, is each event has a score behind it. And every time they do an action that has a score associated with a particular persona, you get more aligned to that persona. And over time, you end up in a position where we can have a fairly safe guess as to why you're on the website. So I was talking to a customer today that this morning that sells tea and coffee, and it's quite a nice simple example where, as a user, when you're navigating the site, you will often gravitate towards one type of one region, or certainly a format. So you're drinking your coffee, it's probably a bean to cup, knowing you, Carlos. So you might be buying more aligned to buying beans rather than buying ground coffee. And it's subtle things like that that really can work well with personalization, because when you start coming to the product details pages, instead of focusing and showing you the ground coffee first because it's the cheapest, the menu can adjust, or the drop down list can adjust to default to beans, and then you're seeing the bean price as opposed to the ground price, so you get a more sort of honest journey through the site that's tailored to you. But again, I mean that's often sort of potentially quite far down the journey, because you've got to understand how your users react and what they align to.
And so just walk me through then, or walk us through. We have quite a few people now. Very cool. The basic steps that people miss, or teams miss, because you can get as complex as you want, it seems.
Yeah.
But even in that amount of complexity, probably when you get into like a mid-size or a larger company, you need to start with the quicker wins as well, to show some results, and then work from there backwards, right? So what are the steps that you'd say teams miss when trying to implement personalization?
Yeah. So a lot of the time, I think they come at it somewhat backwards. So they get led by, here's a shiny new tool over here that we want to go and implement. And they try and work out how they're going to generate the data to go and sort of put it in. So I mentioned earlier that what we tend to do is we implement the data capture as early. So data is key. So you need to make sure you've got good structured data in whatever platform you decide to use. Um, you need to make sure that the order data is accessible and related to the customers, which if you don't have a defined customer, you can always use the email address or some other grouping there. So the development team especially need to make sure the events are being sent up, and we try and take an approach of send everything, because you never know if it's going to be useful in the future. So any form of interaction with certainly product data, make sure you send over what the product was that they're interacting with, any relevant meta around that product. So in the case of coffee, for example, you'd send up the product type or the origin, because the systems, we were talking about AI a minute ago, they can start to learn about this. They're able to, where they really sort of they really succeed and they're really strong, is spotting the gaps that we can't see as humans. But once you've got your data coming into your CDP or whatever engine it is you're going to be sort of running and operating, you can then use that to define your personas. And again, don't go hyper focused to start with. Try and be more broad brush. Think sort of higher level, and it may be size groups if you're selling sort of shirts or clothing and apparel. So a good use of that data is to go and sort of, when you're recommending products, especially at sale time, use the perceived persona of that person, whether they're sort of small, medium, or large, to then go and show the products on the default category layout that we all sort of curate and spend all the time as retailers messing around with. Let the system go and choose products that are available in the size group that the customer is looking at. So I think getting the data in the events is the first and probably most key sort of key requirement. Keeping it simple and broad brush. So when you're defining your personas, keep them as generic as possible, and then you can always drill down later, and always look at personalization as a broad brush, and then start sort of chunking it down as you go through the process, and you're finding and learning what people respond to, because it's often not what we expect. That's the reality we found.
And in terms of internal resources, we have a recruiter here today, operating in the commerce space. So typically, it's I think it's really interesting what you're saying, because this is part of an organizational challenge that I'd say. Uh, the customer sometimes don't know what they don't know, and then they may not have the resources internally to operate this. So what's your
Yeah.
best recommendation there in terms of resources, what you need in-house in terms of people and knowledge and capabilities?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, obviously larger organizations that got the luxury of sort of data science teams and things can really go to town with some of the stuff you can do with personalization. The reality is most retailers, I think, are driven by some form of the marketing department's motivation. They want to be able to reach more customers. They want to be able to bring them back. They want to make more of the customers that are there. And then it ends up being the engineers that go and implement the solutions. So I think the challenge is, if you've just got sort of, there's more sort of design focused engineers, then sometimes they don't understand the data behind it and the benefits of setting up things. So I'd say get a data orientated engineer rather than necessarily a data scientist or a data analyst. I think for defining the personas, that's a pretty well known and well established task now within the marketing community. I mean, there's we've been doing this for years, decades, hundreds of years probably. If you look back at newspapers and things in that sense. So you can do it on a sort of fairly small scale, really. And the tools are what do the heavy lifting for you, I think. But yeah, I'd say sort of an engineering component and somebody from marketing to define what it is you want to go and do. And then reporting, keeping an eye on the sort of the KPIs and the return on investment. I think that's also important, because it's fine to go and put all these personas in play and all this personalization. And if you're going to get really fancy, your hyper personalization, where it's sort of super granular to one person's interaction with that one visit. But if it's not nudging the needle on what your KPI is, whether it's an increase in sales or returning visitors, or if you don't define that from the outset, you can sort of spend a lot of time and money building functionality that ultimately doesn't bring the value to the platform.
Tim, I have a question that is more like it was not in my script, but I think it's a bit based on the event you attended, like the conversational commerce aspect of things. And I'm a WhatsApp person, as you know now, or by now, and I'm a big believer that people are there, and I think you mentioned something really interesting. You said the goal is to have the repeat visit, right?
Yeah.
People visiting the website, but how do you see, like, I will use WhatsApp, but the conversational layer could be anything, Viber, whatever people use in the UK, Messenger, WhatsApp, and how do you see that changing commerce and what's happening today? People are talking about open AI as a new way to research and potentially purchase product, and WhatsApp, and really the role of a website, because uh, I tend to see websites more like sometimes as digital catalogs,
Yep.
but they can be quite static, and WhatsApp for me is it's where action really is, depending what you're gonna buy. So because you could expect the person on the other side of the counter, the digital counter, like to serve you and to talk to like a customer service and really finalize your purchase there. So where I'm trying to get is, we had the websites. People used to buy on websites. They do, of course, but I think there's a lot of the journey now going to like conversational platforms, right? And how do you see
Yeah.
that those changes?
So I mean, I would almost argue it's not a new thing. I'm sure
Mhm.
you're sort of familiar with like the omni-commerce from probably 10, 15 years ago now, if not longer. And I think this is the thing. When we're talking about bringing customers back, we're not necessarily just bringing them back to the website. I mean, it's
Right.
much broader than that. Like the best experiences are the ones where you can find something online, walk into a shop and pick it up, click and collect, or and then there's plenty of experiences with like Selfridges and things where I think Burberry do it quite well, where you can go onto their website and you start engaging with their chat bot and they'll move it over to WhatsApp or wherever to continue
Mhm.
the conversation. I think certainly in the next sort of 5 years, webs, what we know as the web will remain, but I think it will be much less, certainly for the next generation coming through. I'm a big believer in WhatsApp, SMS messaging systems for commerce. We've got a couple of customers trying out some I personally call more hyper personalization. So in the case of WhatsApp and SMS, we've all had it. So the customer that I'm thinking of in particular is a B2B wholesaler for giftware, and they sell stock as any wholesaler does, and they get to the end of lines and they've got sort of bits, a few boxes here and there of items. Now, typically, you would go and put that onto a website in a sale category, and then you'd hope that people would come and buy it. But what we're finding is it's much better to go and target people that might be interested in that stock by segmenting your customers and then sending them a message. SMS is phenomenal for this. Like it's something like 96%, I think it was, of messages get read within 3 minutes. WhatsApp is interesting. It's the numbers are slightly lower because WhatsApp is seen as a messaging channel, and where sort of people generally allow SMSs to come through all the time, WhatsApp is there. But the ability to be able to go and be laser focused and say, "Hey, Carlos, that you remember that item you bought sort of 6 months ago? Well, we've got this on sale now, or there's a complimentary item you bought, the mug, maybe you want the plate with it," and making people feel like, I mean, this is the whole point of personalization, right? It's making people feel like they are your one and only. The experience that we're trying to replicate is you're walking into a shop and the shop owner comes up to you and say, "Mr. Gaunt, lovely to see you. I haven't seen you for ages. It's been, how's that jacket working for you?" And that's personalization in play. So absolutely, I think it's going to move over.
100%. That's I would actually love if people could comment in the chat, Gustavo. Let's try to nudge them, because I think there's a cultural uh element there, Tim. For example, WhatsApp in Brazil is massive, and
Mhm.
whenever someone sends me, like parents from my daughter's schools, they communicate through SMS, and I'm like, dude, who's using SMS or Messenger? you know, so
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
Well,
te- I'm
America,
te-
I think, is the answer there. I think America uses Messenger, and then everywhere
yeah,
else in the world uses WeChat
in
or
Denmark they use Messenger as well, and I'm like, I I don't get it, you know. So I'm typically the parent that is never responding. It's always late because I'm always on WhatsApp. Uh, I think there's a cultural element there as well, and how people are, maybe that's not the right word in English, triggered, or they see which whatever messaging app they see first.
Mm, interesting.
You know, that's so interesting because in Brazil, Brazilians are WhatsApp people, like in India as well. So I'd say more like emerging markets. In the
Mm.
UK, you're mentioning SMS, but in the end, you have a your phone, and people are checking their phones first. So the question maybe is more like, you need to have a layer that spreads the message where your customer is, and then you need to
Where the
understand,
customer wants it. Exactly. Exactly that. I
right?
mean, and you can monitor it. Like, you can see
Mhm.
what I mean, the simplest thing is you just ask people, how do you want your how do you want your messages to come? Do you want it to be email? Do you want it to be SMS? Do you want it to be WhatsApp or post in some cases and phone for some of our customers? And I think it's a really interesting question because often users tell you where they want to go and do it, but then when you broadcast out, they act in somewhere else. And it's like, hang
Yes,
on a
and that,
minute.
that was the question behind the question, because I think people lie. Like I certainly lie when I have to fill out a form, or the whole thing about the last click when you fill out like a form to, let's say, an event, and I
Yeah.
never want to get the communication. So you just tick a box, whatever, if you're forced to tick a box. But that doesn't necessarily is representative of the truth, like how you want to communicate, right? So
Yeah.
that's what's really interesting, like the behavior behind what you say.
And this is where, sort of, bring it back to the personalization, where personalization is so interesting because for so long we've been sort of sitting there saying, I'm getting recommended a red dress and I don't really understand why I've been, and I've never spoken about it. It must be somebody listening in. But when you actually see the data across sort of multi-platforms from multiple users, we talk about it as the herd. So, everybody across your website, we can kind of, group into cohorts of people, and we can find similarities that we didn't necessarily know were there. There are things that we're going to know, like, if you're a wine drinker, you're going to drink one particular style of wine over another, whether that's by region or sort of even if it's new world versus old world. And there are always these little indicators in the data that we're not aware of. And I think if you talk to a user, they will tell you they know themselves better than anybody else. Yet you go talk to Facebook, for example, and Facebook will say, "Well, I think you said that, but actually we think we're over here." So it's fascinating sort of sector to be involved in.
Do you have any examples of insights you created, specifically on what you're saying? Let's say a customer of yours, they were saying something about themselves or their customers, and then you said, no, but that's not what the data is saying. The data is showing something else, and then they were like, aha, do you have any examples of, maybe you could, that, of course,
Yeah,
if you remember any.
certainly more on sort of like the financial services side of things. There's been
Mm,
plenty of instances where people will come along and they'll say, "Well, I'm a very experienced trader," for example, which is the most dangerous thing for any sort of financial institution, because you react differently to an experienced trader. Right? You assume they know the guardrails and sort of what they should and shouldn't go and do. But then they go and invest. Their investment portfolio represents a much more junior or sort of trader, if that makes sense, or investor. And I think that's the most interesting one for me, because you end up in this scenario where, I mean, we all talked about the Dunning-Kruger curve and sort of, peak of awareness and things. And I think you've got to very gently remind people that they may not know all there is to go and know
mhm,
about a particular subject. I think in retail, it's less impactful in some cases. Um,
mhm.
it doesn't really matter too much, I suppose, if people say, well, I like red dresses, but then they always buy a blue one and that sort of thing. We can still recommend based on those profiles. But there's various ones in the past that have come up.
And what? So if we speak about finance and retail, what are some of the parallels that you could draw? Like you're doing personalization in finance as well, right?
Yeah.
And so tell us about that journey and how that helped you in the commerce in retail and B2B
So
commerce.
we got involved with it probably about 15 years ago or so, when we were asked to sort of help build a system. We got involved with a company down in Kent, and we've gone through various different transitions with the data. So right from ingesting all the Twitter data and then taking the live Twitter stream and trying to understand what was happening across sort of the various different social media networks, Reddit and Facebook and the news, to then be able to offer recommendations of instruments you should go and have a look at, companies you should go and invest in. And the sort of the one of the big parities between the two, and where it's different to things like Netflix, is trends, especially, they move and evolve quite quickly. So you were talking earlier, Carlos, about sort of what's changed in the tech stack in the last 3 years. Well, actually, I think there's another shift that's happened with things like TikTok. And I think with some of these newer social media networks, this is where the classic personalization, which I'd sort of pigeonhole things like Netflix in, where it's here's a big back catalogue of films, and here's some similar films. If you watch this film, you may also like. It's very static. It doesn't need to move very quickly. One of the similarities between retail and finance is that it changes. If there's something breaking in the news, for example, well, then that can shift the price of a stock. In the same way, now we're seeing with social media, with the sort of reels on Instagram and TikTok, where you get these live streamers, suddenly there's a product that's sort of going crazy. And in fact, I think one of the Evolve members, the Avon lady, I forget her name now, but she was talking about the shampoo that was used at Avon. That's in South Africa. They're using as a rug cleaner, isn't it?
South Africa and Turkey, I guess the examples
Yeah,
where he just ran
and
out
it's
of stock because of an influencer.
exactly, and it's having a system that can react to that, because what's sort of happening is happening so quickly, and we're talking sort of within minutes or hours a lot of the time, to be able to go and react to it and correct your sort of personalization focus.
Brilliant. So Tem, she says that in her Amazon FBA side business selling via Prime, WhatsApp has become a personalization channel. Wholesalers now use in her category buying data to send tailored job lot offers directly in chat at a B2B level. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that
it's
makes sense.
exactly what we're doing for the giftware. It's we talk about buying as well on things like WhatsApp and these platforms. We get pushback from our retailers saying, well, people don't want to. But I mean, you take this sign that we've got behind me here. I reached out to somebody in the UK to come and buy this when we were building the office out, and I think it was something like £800-900 or something silly, and about 3 months lead time on it. And I actually sort of went on to AliExpress, found a supplier that was sort of talking about it. They quickly moved me into WhatsApp, and we had a whole direct conversation exactly about my requirements of sending me photos and whatever. Within about 10-15 minutes, suddenly we had a clear definition of what my order was, beyond anything that a website would have been able to go and do. And the product arrived, I think it was about sort of like 7-8 days later or something. It was crazy how fast it all happened. So I think there is definitely a move to these sort of other platforms for purchasing.
Very cool. Hawan wants to join in. So let me just see. Gustavo will have to leave. His son they just told us that he's got a fever.
Oh
So
no.
I'm alone. No worries. Take care, Gustavo. So we'll start inviting everyone, whoever wants to join us live, as always. So Hawan is joining us from the US. Hawan, welcome. Luis, Max, Tim is here. Lara, if you want to join, Lara, you're very welcome. Kamal, Kamal. You remember Kamal?
I mean, just while we're waiting for people, I guess some of the things that you were asking about earlier, what are the simple wins? there's a lot of insights into the data that we've already got available to. So, and one of the
Hmm.
things that we found as a very quick win that if people aren't doing is we call nudge and win back emails. So you're talking about sort
Hmm.
of when people um, know when we know more about them than they know themselves. So durations is fairly easy to extract from any order data. So average purchase duration, whether it's by region or just at a high level, and nudging people. So let's say you've got a 6 week buying cycle on average, dropping people a nudge email of their previous carts or similar products they bought in previous times is so simple to go and do technically these days. You can then couple that with your win back type style emails where if you know that the average customer buys every 6 months, well, send people a really stonkingly good offer after 12 months, another one after 18 months and 24 months, because you then end up, you're not going to be losing anything if you drive these people back. And again, there's things which, if you're using any form of MailChimp type emailing platform or um, SMS platform, we're finding that's sort of accounting off quite often for sort of 15-20% of sales now, because of that sort of reminder that you exist as a retailer. You don't run into that problem of who was it I bought that from the other day.
Hmm. I think those types. I'm gonna add Hawan. Hawan just left the backstage. No, moved to stage. Yes. Um, but those types of technologies and the way you personalize the messages they're gonna become so powerful. For
Mm.
example, let's say that you owe money to a bank, like nudging people, like say, hey, uh, don't forget to pay us, or you have an outstanding bill or whatever it is. Uh, it's really powerful also to get the money back, right? It's
Yeah.
all personalization in a way. We did an event in Brazil for some guys. They have an AI voice technology, and they're using that for call centers and banks. And I mean, it's very interesting, but it also makes me a little scared because I'm getting like AI voice calls nowadays that are perfect. I'm not sure if you had this
Yeah.
experience, but they sound perfect,
They're spot
and they
on.
use
Yeah.
that to, you know, they use that to what do you call, like to get the money back, or to charge people. Charge is not the right word, but to,
Yeah.
yeah, just to nudge them and
Chase
say,
them.
hey,
Chase them.
to kind of yeah, exactly. And so in a
And
way it's also a way to, because you can create then cohorts and then get people to
yeah.
offer credit or whatever, right?
And I mean, we've done the same. I mean, we don't phone people because it's not necessary in our use case. But one of the products we've got is an AI video avatar that will present you your news and your insights and your trading things, and it's generated
Mhm.
twice a day, sort of before market open and before market close. And it's fascinating to see how people engage with that on their various different platforms. And it's AI. We tell them it's AI, but they'll still have a conversation with it in the chat, saying, "Oh, it's really good insights. Thanks very much." It's really bizarre in some ways, but like you say, the 11 labs for voice is very, very good these days. It's really impressive.
Nice. Owen, go ahead, my friend. Ask away.
Nice, Tim. Really nice to meet you. Thank you for your time. I have a couple of questions. I'd like to know a little bit more about your agent's experience and how you deal. It's I believe one of the most interesting things about Evolve is how we can connect with people from anywhere and hear their own experience and local experience. It's really important. So I'd like to hear about you, about the UK clients. What are the most wrong decisions that they had they made before they arrived to you? So we are talking about personalizations or tech stack, or, well, whatever they do wrong, and you have to solve that. You see it as
Okay.
a local problem. And the second question would be, how do you deal with clients who want short-term wins, but they actually need long-term strategic changes?
Mm. Yeah, interesting question. So I'd say the probably the biggest most impactful is what I'd say is paralysis through analysis, in that they just don't know where to start when it comes to sort of implementing any form of personalization. They've usually, as Carlos was alluding to, they're gone and got their shopping list from Gartner, and there's all sorts of overlaps and crossovers and sort of conflicts really. So they've got sort of two platforms that both do email shots. Well, that's great, but then you've got to go and keep them in sync, and if they engage with one email, all those sort of comms sort of problems. So I say that's probably the biggest starting point. But overcomplicating things, I think, is really the biggest challenge. Like it's so easy with all the cool tools you can do and the shiny demos to add effectively that sort of tech stack above what's you're missing the core issue of the data. I think how do you solve that problem? I mean, that's really just sort of working with the customers and leading them on a journey. I think there are often, it's a bit like with sort of your pay-per-click. People think you can just turn it on and suddenly you get results. One of the challenges certainly with good personalization is there is a certain baseline level of data that you need, which can be sort of only 6 weeks. Depends on the cadence of the site, and how many orders and things. But what we tend to do is we look at the historic. So it's harder if it's a new retailer that's sort of coming out, because they don't have the historic data, and then you could work on a lot of assumptions. But there are a lot of quite useful data insights. Average time between purchases, the day of week that people sort of purchase on. You've got to sort of factor out the false positives and the misleading data points. Like if you always send your emails on a Thursday, don't be surprised that all your orders are coming through on a Thursday. So you've got to sort of factor that into your decision flow. But location is a really good starting point. So if you want some really quick wins, targeting people, if you've got physical stores, sending targeted emails around each of the physical stores within sort of, depends on the area obviously, but in the UK, 15, 25 miles is usually about as far as you want to go and draw somebody to store. And there are plenty of tools out there. I mean, obviously Excel, but there are plenty of tools out there now that will do sort of your distance reporting, sort of finding customers within a search region. And I think it's sometimes the win has to be reframed as not sales, but potentially awareness is another thing that works quite well. And we say, well, look, we need a bit more data, but while we're getting that data, we can drive traffic to this particular product. So you can then evidence that in the uptick in visits or add to carts or abandoned baskets. And if you're not doing things like abandoned baskets these days, then that's certainly a quick win that you can often implement into customers' sites, and see a pretty immediate uptick in sales in reality. Does that cover your question?
Yeah, it covered. Thank you. It's really really interesting to see that. Well, clients usually have the same issues globally. Always want the fastest win as possible. But I found really interesting what you said, that if the win is not a sale, but maybe an improvement or solving an issue would be seen
Yeah.
as also as a win. So
Well, I
nice.
mean,
Really nice.
it's difficult as an agency that you're being asked to go and sell a product, but there's a lot of decision points going into selling that product. Is the product price the right price for the market? Is the quality, is the brand sort of representative of the price? And we always try and sort of factor those in and have an honest conversation. But the problems, I think, for retailers are global, and this is the thing I love about Evolve, because as you say, we can share experiences and pick things up. So I mean, we get quite an isolated look within our client base, but when you talk to the clients, you realize how broad a view for agencies across all the clients that we have. And there's been a number of cases where we'll be talking, like we're talking to a Singaporean company today, giving very similar advice to one based in Milwaukee, which was unheard of. I'd say sort of 10 years ago. It was often just in the UK or Europe, but yeah, it's fascinating.
Thank you for sharing your experience.
Thank you for joining us.
All right. So now we have our friend Kamal. What's up, Kamal? You're on mute, just so you know. You need to unmute yourself. I don't know how.
Well, it was just a bit slow. I got it. Hi, Carlos. Hi, Juan. Hi, Tim. How you doing, pal? You well?
Hi, Kamal. Yeah, good, thanks.
Cool. I was just listening in, and a couple of things that kind of I thought I'd bring up into the conversation is, we're still speaking about structured data quite a lot, about the importance of getting that data structured there. That's been a conversation in the market for 15 plus years now, structure your data, structure your data, structure your data. Where are we, in terms of that? Are people really getting control of their data now? Is that what you're seeing? And just a quick little follow-up again, just another term for, let's say 2.5 to 3 years, the hyper-personalization. It's been in the vocabulary. It's in many sessions. It's coming up. Tim, where do you think we are in terms of that hyper personalization stage? Is that something that we're in full flowing in that element now, or is the majority still kind of building up towards that?
Yeah, well, good questions. So I think to talk about the structured data just quickly first, the retailers are much more aware of it, as you say, and I think one of the benefits, I don't think many people are necessarily aware of it, but Shopify for years has had this view of it's not just going to be the web-based sales. I mean, I don't think they necessarily saw the AI agentic sort of buying process, but they've certainly had their own app for a number of years, trying to sort of build a marketplace there, and they do sort of various different things on sort of WhatsApp and things. So larger platforms have standardized their data. Where it gets interesting is the nuances and the subtle differences between, say, the Shopify data model and the Magento data model. They're very similar, but there's little subtle differences between them. And I think when you're migrating between platforms, it's much easier. There are intermediaries now that will consume the data in for reporting purposes, especially, and they have standard data models that are then, so they work for whether you've got a sort of a flat order line model or order to shipment to order line, or all the various different variations. So I think retailers are not necessarily driving the structured data side of things. I think it's the platforms that are driving that, because they've realized that there's other uses for this data that they need to be involved with or make available. So it's definitely better than the Wild West sort of 5-10 years ago, for sure. Is there further we can go? Probably. The data formats at the moment are largely sort of data, JSON formats. Some of them are XML. When it comes to the actual sort of how the data is shared, which are fine for AI and LLM sort of scenarios that you can go and feed your data into. But I'm sure there's going to be newer formats coming out in the sort of the newer years. And then I think as far as a hyper personalization is concerned, I'd argue we've been doing it for a long time, and it's just yet another fancy word to differentiate between personalization and sort of people really going down to the individual. And I suppose for those that aren't so familiar with it, when it comes to retail, it's kind of the difference between taking the sort of the herd mentality for targeting and saying, oh well, you've engaged with coffee beans, to actually being right, Kamal, you bought this coffee bean 6 weeks ago, you bought it 6 weeks before, and we think we can go and give you this. We want to give you this one instead, because we've noticed that people that have done that same journey previously, this is the next step in their journey. And instead of sending out 1,000 emails through something like MailChimp or Create Send, it's then being much more targeted and saying, right, okay, it's Kamal's 6-week purchase window. Now this is when we want to go and do it. So send him a personal email that has exactly the information about him and showing the love. And I think coming back to retailers, we're just taking guide from bricks and mortar. These are places that have been doing it for years. As I say, you go into Tesco's and you can go, and that's your sort of your MailChimp-esque marketing, or you can go into the little shop down the road that you need groceries, and he'll recognize you, or they'll sell you the tomatoes or whatever it was that you bought before.
Thank you.
All right.
I agree. Sorry, I was just going to note. Yeah, I think the platforms need to kind of help with that. A big part of standardization. And yeah, like I say, I'm interested. I was interested in that hyper personalization term for me. So I really appreciate your little feedback.
Very happy to have a chat on, and this is touching on one sort of point. Like the whole point for me of Evolve is that we're sharing experiences and spotting opportunities for our own customers. So hook me up on LinkedIn or WhatsApp, and then we'll have a chat. It's as Carlos knows, I'm on WhatsApp just almost as much as him. But
what's up, SMS? I'll keep an eye.
Not SMS. No. That's good for broadcast messages, but for chats, yeah.
Perfect. Tim also says that your Bond jewelry, which I'm not familiar. Bond jewelry, you guys know with it?
Yes.
Are you familiar with it? Yes.
Yeah.
So your Bond jewelry site uses live pricing. How could other industries, for example, marketplace platforms, use real-time data to stand out online? Interesting are for me as I used to recruit for a diamond retailer founder.
Interesting. So how can they use live data to be reactive as a retailer? I mean, I think that would be fascinating. So there are a lot of sort of price providers out in the marketplace now. It's certainly giving you competitors' pricing, so you can go and identify people that sell sort of similar products, especially if you're selling branded items. We have one customer that is very particular on price shifts. So they have a platform that's monitoring all their competitors all the time, and if they see that you've got an item in your, we'll call it a wish list, it's not technically a wish list, but if you've got it on your wish list and that item price for the competitors drops, and it will drop on their platform as well, they'll then message off to go and stimulate that sale and say, hey guys, so it's your hyper personalization in effect, I suppose, Kamal. I think for retailers though, it's an interesting one, because I think they've got to be reactive to different type of data. Price being one, but I mentioned about the social earlier. I think that's a real driver for sales and opportunities now, that if you watch what's happening in the news and you're watching what's happening on the social media platforms, when news breaks, being able to be reactive around that. So using a recent example, the budget, if you as a retailer can automate that identification, something that applies to your products, and then you can ping off a message saying, hey, something's just happened, that's so powerful, because it sort of shows that you care about the interests of your users. If something's going up in price, PV car prices, but you could ping off a message and say, hey, look, close out your deal on your car now, because next month or next week it's going to go and increase. And I think, again, trying to think about your users and make them realize that you care about them as a customer, that's when personalization really has the biggest effect. I don't know if that addresses your question, Tam, but hopefully it does.
Tim, you may open your camera now. And yes, welcome. There you are.
Yeah, that does answer my question. Thank you. I just found it very interesting because currently I'm recruiting very soon for a client who's in the logistics space, the fulfillment space. So basically, they go into like companies like eBay and offer their sellers, the chance to reduce shipping rates. Up until now, it's mainly been available to Amazon FBA sellers like me, whereas eBay sellers have not been able to do that. So it's just very interesting when I saw the sort of different options there. But if I may, I'm not sure how we're doing for time. If I have a quick question about recruiting, I've just made some notes, so forgive me looking. So earlier you mentioned upskilling engineers. It's not every company can afford like a dedicated, data scientist. So how do you see like data and personalization shaping recruitment? Like, do you think companies like yourself will simply upskill your teams? Will you outsource some of those roles, or will you create new budgets to recruit in for those roles?
Interesting. So as an agency, we've got the resources to fill sort of most of the capabilities. So we try and skills fill within our customers. So a lot of our customers have existing teams, and they'll have a great engineering team or a great content team, but they might not have quite such a good, I'm careful put it, but quite a good project management or data analytics side. So we try and work with people to fill those gaps. I think I have mixed feelings about bringing, especially engineering resources, into companies, because if you just go out and say, I'm going to go and hire a data scientist, for example, or an engineer, and you don't already have an engineering component or a data science component within your business, you can overlook some of the complexities and the fact that you need to have sort of a lead engineer, for example, who can go and make the decisions and push back on the business and say, this is why we're not going to do it exactly the way that the CEO just saw a TikTok video and said we're going to implement hyper personalization across our entire platform. You know, so I think having guardrails around these things is always a bit of a challenge. And we find that there is a temptation to hire without necessarily realizing sort of the whole picture of what you need to go and
that's a really good point. And at one of the events, I spoke to the I think she was the chief digital part of the chief digital kind of leadership team for Roman Originals, you know, the women's clothing brand. I'm not sure if it's now. And we're having this discussions, and basically the way things are now is, if you're an engineer, you've got to be able to communicate product, and if you're a product, then you've got to be able to cross, you know, you've got to, every sort of remit within the business has to have an understanding of the other. It's not so clean cut anymore. And like you say, if you bring in like a data scientist, etc., that's fine, but then does the company have the setup for them to be able to initiate and fulfill their roles efficiently? So that's very interesting. Thank you for answering.
That's right. And we used to work with Roman actually for a long time with Peter and co. So it's
with Roman. Oh, nice.
Yeah. I mean, as far as the sort of the logistics side of things, I think it's an interesting space in the UK now, and sort of the sort of third party logistics and the 3PL is, I'd say it's emerging, and it's also quite a good instance where you want to go and use personalization better, and also recruitment. I mean, recruitment it's the difference between doing the broad brush, we've got a job, and just sending around to all your candidates, whether they're applicable for the role or not, and being, especially doing what I imagine you do, and sort of doing much more headhuntery sort of focus thing of, I think this role, Tim, is absolutely for you. And that's where you come back to sort of your hyper personalization. So I think recruitment's got a lot of opportunity. Logistics, the obvious one of here's your parcel, it's coming, that you get your text message is a simple solution, but along the journey there's loads of ways that you could go and improve it. Sort of at the start of it saying, how do you want your parcel to be delivered? Do you want us to leave it somewhere? And again, that's all the personalization journey. So it touches us in all sort of walks of life in reality.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, I'm excited to connect with you offline, because I've got some clients that probably could use your services that are in the software space, not just the physical retail product space. And earlier you mentioned about, you know, the AI video avatars, etc., because a lot of these companies have got old school telesales teams. And although people may not, I personally feel like people are going to start reacting to AI avatars probably better than people, because it might just be seen as, if I may speak simply, it might be seen as a bit of fun initially if it's done the right way, quite creative and edgy.
Well, they're inoffensive. I think that's the thing in their approach. But if you get it right, and because you can take the same content, and just thinking about the news writer as an example, at a high level, we've effectively got three different types of. We've got the fun one that is sort of slightly more light-hearted take of things, and that's quite popular on TikTok. We've got one which is specifically focused around day trading, and one which is around sort of longer-term investments. And people react and can customize the content. And the idea really is that you can totally tailor this. I mean, it's a workflow that you're just tweaking some settings on the way down. And I think AI avatars they're here. I mean, they're so good now. There are some out there that you just can't tell the difference. But talking to sort of Carlos's idea of the WhatsApp, like powering that by AI, it's a bit clunky at the moment. It's not quite there, but I can see certainly within the next sort of 2 years, you'll be having a conversation on WhatsApp or whatever platform you want to work on, and having the same conversation across, but with an AI agent, and having them find exactly the product that you want rather than the human. But it's exciting times.
Very exciting stuff. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Sam. I think on the WhatsApp note, like my dream, we're building our agent, and first step is to just to be able to know to get the data, as you're saying. And when people fill out the application, now they get an email automatically. But we had to do some work with Telegram as well, because WhatsApp, they don't allow, they don't have, we would have to pay for like to be sending messages and be using their API. But my dream is like, imagine that you're in my community, because your career changes, right? So I have the bot like sending you a message saying, hey, what's changed or whatever in your life, or and then you're just filling out the information with stuff that is filling out, it's filling my CRM. And then over time, I know exactly what's your moment, like, because we're not static, right? We are changing, like in 3 months time or 6 months time or whatever. So that's what we're building, early days, but I'll keep you updated.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's great. You have to be a little bit careful, and this is where I have a few disagreements sometimes with my co-founders, that especially when it comes to personalization or hyper personalization, you have to be mindful of the whole purpose of what we're trying to do is make you feel like you're our one and only customer.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
so important to us. So if you take the AI too far, there is a question of you end up being disingenuous, and then you just feel like you're just another number. I don't think we're there yet, but it's one thing that I always think about whenever we're doing any form of AI engagement, conversational or video. It's does it feel like it's tailored for you for your benefit, or are you just doing something for convenience? But yeah, it's a really fun time to be playing with tech these days.
I think that's a great way to finish this session, Tim. This was a perfect video cut, like one of the snippets that I'm gonna publish on LinkedIn. So, dude, with that said, thank you very much. What's the best way for people to find you and have more information about? I mean, people in the community, always WhatsApp, and the community is there. But yeah, if other people want to know more about Tim Gaunt, we are live on LinkedIn, by the way. You know it. If you didn't, now you know it. Tim Gaunt, what's the best way to get to know about your agency, yourself?
Yep. So you can
sell.
find us on our website, which is tsd.digital. I tend to turn up in Google a lot, or LinkedIn. I've just dropped my my profile into the chat there for everybody if you want to connect. Very happy to chat. Anything to be do with e-commerce or tech, to be honest. It's always nice, especially if there's a glass of wine around.
Sweet. And we'll be doing more events. I see Tim, Kamal in the UK, so you can just wait for Evolve there. Tim, this was lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us today. And well, see you all around. All right. You have a great.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, and in this session.